Hi, and welcome to Automation Unpacked Tales from the Warehouse, where we aim to support, guide, and inspire you on your path to automate your warehouse facilities. Today, I'm so pleased to be joined by Guy Courtin, who is somebody that comes to us with an extensive career in the supply chain industry, having been in roles on the research side of the house as an analyst, as well as OEM providers, ERPs, and now as VP of Industry and Advanced Technology at Tecsys. Welcome, Guy.
Thanks, Chloe, and A plus for pronunciation of my name. Your French classes have paid off.
Thank you so much. All right, we're so excited to have you. You're everywhere. I think I see your face pops up everywhere. So I feel so lucky that you're able to join us today and really excited to talk about what's going on over at Texas, what you're seeing in the market, and what automation is looking like today. Um, so last week, Nick Leonard, who is our SVP of product at SBT, who you know well, I know you've
Mhm.
been at the Experience Center in Norfolk.
Yep.
Um, he published a piece in Supply and Demand Chain Executive last week, and he talks about how, in general, automation begins with the same problem statement, which is a lack of data digitization, and that's so critical to be able to execute automation in warehouse facilities, right? So he talks about how the vast majority of warehouses may still be paper based, actually, maybe going off of Excel, for example, to track inventory, and how because of this, introducing a warehouse management system is such a great step and builds that sort of digital foundation that enables companies to then go in and optimize the execution side of the house. So I'd love to
Mhm.
hear a little bit more about your perspective on that and how Texas or just WMSs in general kind of play a critical part of that first step.
No, absolutely. And first, thanks so much, Chloe, for having me on this. I always enjoy these conversations. So I think, yeah, I think that's a really interesting point you bring up because I think a lot of times we forget, in the industry that there's a foundational need when it comes to advanced technologies, which is sort of a baseline, right? A digitization. I know that term gets thrown around a lot, and it certainly has been the past 10, 15, 20 years. And now we sort of leapfrogged and just talked automation with forgetting in a way that you need to have a good foundational base in your warehouse, in your supply chain, in your fulfillment network around your digital assets. And what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? The bottom line is this is that you need some kind of system of record that is going to be able to give you that insight of what is happening in your warehouse, what is happening in your fulfillment network, what's happening in your supply chain. But if we focus specifically on the warehouse, that of course comes back down to good old fashioned warehouse management solution, right? WMS, which is going to act as that repository of that digital twin, if you will, of what's happening in the warehouse. Everything from the most important, of course, where's your inventory? How much do you have? Where is it located within your warehouse? To labor, to the automation, to the robots, to the shelving, to the HVAC systems, right? All that, you need to have some type of system that is going to be up to date, that's going to give you real time insight and visibility into what is happening on the ground. Because as the old saying goes, right, I can't control what I can't measure. So if I can't measure what's happening or have a true image or picture of what's happening in my warehouse, how can I manage it? How can I get efficiencies? How can I serve my customer at the end of the day? And I think that's the part where I think it's a great point, which is all this talk around automation. We still have to start with the foundational piece, which is what does my digital sort of foundation look like? And a big part of that foundation is your WMS system. So I think that's really important for everyone out there to think about when you're embarking on this journey around automation is, well, make sure you have your house in order first, right? Do some house cleaning and ensure that you have your digital strategy up to snuff before you start embarking on the automation strategy.
Absolutely, that makes total sense. And could you walk me through some of the factors that folks should consider when they're looking for a WMS that's a good fit for their business?
It's a great question. I'm kind of tongue in cheek here, right? People would say, well, just go to the Gartner Magic Quadrant and look who's in
Right.
there. And I'd say, that's a good document to at least get a sense of who's in the market. But the reality is this, there's a lot of great WMS vendors out there, ourselves included. And yes, we are in the Magic Quadrant. But I would say for anybody, look first and foremost, what kind of warehouse do you have? right? Is it a level one, level two, or level five? How complicated? How many warehouses do you have? Are you looking at one warehouse or a network of warehouses? Look at your SKU count, right? How many SKUs? What's your inventory mix look like? How much inventory are you carrying? What's the speed by which you're moving inventory in and out of your warehouse? That's going to determine, the complexity of the warehouse or warehouses that you're looking to manage. And that should then give you a sense of, okay, what kind of WMS system do I need to look for? Because while all WMS systems at some level are going to do the basics, right? Receiving, picking, put away, cycle counting, right? All the things that we know warehouse 101 you need to do. The difference becomes, right, sort of the 80-20 rule. All of us can do that 80%. Which one of us do that 20% that's relevant to you? So what do I mean by that? It's interesting. At Texas, we do one of the industries we focus on is healthcare. We have a lot of success in the healthcare space, working with independent distribution networks, hospitals, and their warehouses. And what we have found is that some of the work we've done and some of the adjustments we've made to our WMS are specific to that industry. So, yes, you might be a hospital network, you're looking for a warehouse management solution, and you look and you say, "Oh, company X has a good WMS," and they go talk to them. But then you realize, yeah, they're really good at 3PL. They're not really good at healthcare. Maybe I shouldn't focus so much on that and look for one that has that healthcare bend, if you will. So my advice to folks, Chloe, is really, you know, do your homework. There's a lot of great solutions out there, big, small, medium, but really focus in at the end of the day of, okay, let's assume, and I know we shouldn't do this, that all of the WMSs you're going to look at are going to provide the basic functions of a warehouse, the ones I just mentioned. Where you really want to focus on then is which ones understand my type of warehouse. Because again, a healthcare warehouse is different than an e-com warehouse. It's different than a plumbing warehouse. It's different than a 3PL, right? The list goes on, and it's different than a warehouse for a grocery store, right? So there are subtleties of those warehouses that you want your partner to understand at an intimate level, so that you can take advantage of that knowledge. And I think that's the big one that I want to slight jab here, my friends at Gartner, right? Where like a Gartner quadrant doesn't capture, right? It's not going to capture sort of that precise subtlety that you're going to have within the different solutions. So again, I would say to anyone, who's embarking in that journey, to really take your time to understand again how that WMS solution can address your specific needs from your industry point of view, as well as all the others I just listed. But I think it's the positive part, a lot of options. The challenge, a lot of options.
Yeah, yeah, exactly, and I definitely wanna get into, some of those challenges in today's conversation, and yeah, I hear what you're saying is, like, context is so important, it is never gonna be a one size fits all. I know you've been on the road a lot having conversations with folks. I would love to hear just, like, what's top of mind, like, what are people saying out there?
Yeah, no, it's been crazy, and it's only gonna get crazier the next few months. But I do love it. I'm one of those strange people that actually enjoys being in airports. Yeah, one of the big things, Chloe, if we look at, start with the warehouse and dive into some of the conversation around automation. One of the things I'm hearing a lot of is, again, it's the desire to explore, to look at automation has not waned at all. Now, I do realize, like, if you look at sort of general press, what's being talked about out there, you would think automation is sort of old hat by now. But we all know, news cycles are very short. And once that shiny object is done, we move on to the next one. I think now the next one is AI and generative AI. And, we can have that whole discussion. But the reality is, on the ground, people are still looking and wanting to invest and are making strides towards investing more and more in automation for their warehouse. Having said that, what has been really interesting the past few months I've been on the road talking to prospects and customers is there's a much more educated view on what is automation for them, what is available, and what I'm seeing, which I think is very interesting, is this waking up to the notion of having interoperability within automation within my warehouse. So, what do I mean by that? If you look at automation, we go back 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years, pre-pandemic. I actually was at Six Rivers, right? So at an AMR company, and a lot of the business we had was people had a very finite problem, which was, hey, we don't have enough pickers. We have a labor issue. We have to pick more items. We don't have the time to rip down aisles and shelves and all this and start over. So, what can you provide me where I have a labor shortage? I have to increase my picks and be more precise. All of a sudden, AMRs like Six River, of course, Locust or others came into the picture. And now there was a solution for a finite problem. You fast forward to today, and I think what you're seeing is more and more customers are saying, okay, you can solve my picking issue, but how does that integrate now with my takeaway issue or my the beginning of my warehouse, or how does that happen with put away or things like that? How do you interoperate potentially a system that's going to go into my aisles to pick, but then give it to another robot that's going to build the pallet to then ship it out? Or what if I have items coming in my loading dock? How do I get those over to a storage system where I want to put them away and then have someone else come and pick them? So you're starting to have these questions in the market, which I think are not just timely, but very relevant. And it's a challenge, right? It's a challenge for automation players now because, in my opinion, a lot of the automation players have laser focused on what they were going to automate in the warehouse. And in a way, kind of said, well, we'll worry about interoperability, the other parts of the warehouse down the road. Let's just focus and capture market for picking or put away or dunnage removal or storage. And now all of a sudden, the customers are asking them, it's time to think about this and to at least give us, the customer, an idea of where your roadmap lies with this. Where's your thinking? What's your strategy? Might not be fully baked, but we want to see that you've thought about this and that you can share with us, here's where we're going to go over the next 5, 10 years and what we're doing to get there. So that's one big area I've seen. The second one, which is really kind of interesting and one that I sometimes forget, but there's still a lot of warehouses I go to that, back to the beginning of this conversation, Chloe, is they're still back in the 90s or 80s, maybe the 70s, right? They're still doing a lot of things manually, a lot of analog processes.
Mhm.
They're still focusing on almost sort of their house cleaning first before they can even embark on a digital journey, let alone an automation journey. And that's something that I constantly have to remind myself on this, which is, a lot of us that work in technology, a lot of us work in software or hardware. You guys at SVT, us here at Texas, we live and breathe this stuff 24/7. And when we go out there, we realize, well, wait a minute, they have another day job, which is to store products and move products to where they need to go. They're not 24/7 thinking about technology. So for them, they might just be, trying to keep the lights on. And yeah, technology is great, but that's way down the road for me. So it's kind of a sobering reminder at times for me, at least, to say technology is great. I love it. I see the value of it. I think that's really important, but there's sometimes customers, right? They're still dealing with issues, analog issues from, decades ago, that they got to solve those first before you come to them with this shiny new object called a WMS system or a robot. So that's a lesson that I I cherish in a way, because every time I go out there, it reminds myself that the reality out there is very different than the reality sometimes in our businesses. When again, we live and breathe this stuff, so uh, we think we're all at that same level of digital maturity, but the reality is we're not.
Yeah, absolutely. And I wanted to cite this one quote or stat because I think it really ties in so well with what you're talking about. MHI reports that the adoption of robotics and automation is expected to grow from 28 to 79% over the next 5 years of the adoption, right? And that came out last year. And I think about that, right? And I think people constantly, to your point earlier, like there's so many news articles about like AI, automation. I would think from a customer perspective, I see data and stats like that, and you're like, "Okay, great." Like I already have like my day job pressures and responsibilities, peak seasons coming up, and now like, you have these immense pressures to innovate and change. And I would love to talk to you about sort of some of these challenges. Like buying is hard, right? Like I do not envy that role. I know we were both at ProMat in March, and you go around and it's overwhelming, quite frankly. It's cool, right? There's like flashy new tech, but the reality is so many people are so far away from like, getting to a point where they can just like, "Oh, yeah, this, that," right? Like, the
Right.
reality is and I think this goes across not even just this industry, I think just tech in general. Um, it doesn't really always matter. Like, it doesn't what you see out there doesn't reflect the current state, and I think it can be almost intimidating for customers, right? Where it's like, "Oh my god, I'm already so far behind, where do I even start?" And then that leads to this paralysis, right? And then you're asking me to, like, go change everything, and
Right.
I would just imagine it just being incredibly daunting. I mean, bringing in a WMS system and then, or WMS, bringing in any automation, it just seems like a lot. So I would love to break down a little bit around why that's hard. I know that you guys led automation tours at Promat, and I'd imagine that's sort of starting to educate, right? And make what feels overwhelming and daunting a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, no, I'll give you a funny anecdote from a prior life of mine. And I remember when I was an industry analyst, I went to talk to, a very large manufacturer, right, multi-billion-dollar manufacturer, and talked about their factory and the software they were using. And this is a while back, but I remember they told me, "Well, we run Manugistics," and I said, "Wait a minute, Manugistics has been bought by the time JDA for years now. Like they've basically been off the market." And I know that most of the Manu people had left. And they said, "Yeah." They said, "We haven't had any updates. It just runs on-prem." Um, they're like, "It does the work. What do I need to change it?" Right? I have plenty of other things to do other than getting on the latest and greatest version of the factory planning software because it works. And it was one of those aha moments where I'm like, yeah, like it's not a burning platform, right? Why change for the sake of change? And I think to your point, Clay, that's the bazillion dollar question, right? Is how do we in technology, I think we always run towards, hey, we have the latest and greatest. This is why you need it, right? Can't you see the vision? Can't you change, right? And what we forget at times is, to your point, these people have day jobs, these people have careers, these people have other pressures, if you will, that just changing self fulfillment network around your digital assets. And what do we mean by that? What do we mean by that? The bottom line is this, is that you need some kind of system of record that is going to be able to give you that insight of what is happening in your warehouse, what is happening in your fulfillment network, what's happening in your supply chain. But if we focus specifically on the warehouse, that of course comes back down to good old fashioned warehouse management solution, right? WMS, which is going to act as that repository of that digital twin, if you will, of what's happening in the warehouse. Everything from the most important, of course, where's your inventory? How much do you have? Where is it located within your warehouse? To labor, to the automation, to the robots, to the shelving, to the HVAC systems, right? All that, you need to have some type of system that is going to be up to date, that's going to give you real time insight and visibility into what is happening on the ground. Because as the old saying goes, right, I can't control what I can't measure. So if I can't measure what's happening or have a true image or picture of what's happening in my warehouse, how can I manage it? How can I get efficiencies? How can I serve my customer at the end of the day? And I think that's the part where I think it's a great point, which is all this talk around automation. We still have to start with the foundational piece, which is in a cobot to work with my labor. But my labor is used to pushing that cart and all of a sudden and picking off a paper. And now you're telling them to do it this other way. Yes, I get the benefits, but we sometimes we gloss over what are some of the changes that might be happen within the warehouse. And one of the things I constantly beat this drum, and this is my little soapbox, is, when I talk to prospects and customers about automation, I always say, think about change management, right? Don't just think about putting in a locus bot or an IM robotics bot or a fetch bot in your system, or putting in, we haven't talked about ASRSs or goods to person. That's even more obtrusive. But, if I'm just putting in these AMRs, don't just think about what this does for the job you're trying to do. So picking or things of that nature. What does it do from change management? Not just within your warehouse either, but what does it do potentially across your organization? Because all of a sudden now, one example I had this great conversation with someone who said, yeah, we put in AMRs to do picking and it was fantastic. Our pick rate went through the roof, but we just moved, the obstruction, so to speak,
Yeah.
right? We just moved it from the picking zone now to takeaway.
Yeah.
Because now all of a sudden we had all these orders being picked properly. So the constraint got moved down the chain, so to speak. And now at takeaway, I did not have enough labor to take all these picks and then put them away, and not put them away, but put them in an area where I could then ship them through my FedExes, my UPS, and all this. Oh, and by the way, I ran out of totes now in my induct space. So I had people just sitting there doing nothing because I couldn't induct any more orders because all the totes were stuck at takeaway because we're picking so fast. So all of a sudden the constraints moved around in my system. And that's change management. That's things that we have to constantly be thinking about and looking at from a holistic point of view. And that's hard. And when it becomes hard, I think people then are like, yeah, I'm just gonna ignore it. you know, I'm just gonna let someone else deal with it because you know what? I'm gonna optimize what I've been asked to do, which is picking, and the rest we'll figure out later. And that's okay, right? Sometimes it is okay to you know to run fast and to see what happens and to adapt. But I would just caution people again when it comes to some of these changes and these adoptions is to keep that in mind. And it's a challenge, right? It's not easy.
Yeah, not at all. And I think that's where, to your point, like having a vision and thinking through these different scenarios, right? If I optimize this workflow, is that going to create a bottleneck somewhere else? Really thinking that through using the data that you have today and playing out those scenarios and then just taking that iterative approach, right? Because if you were gonna like go after every single, area to optimize, you'll never get it right? Like that's for certain, right?
Yeah, yeah, that's sort of yeah. Well, I think this notion of pure optimization across the whole system, we all know it's impossible, but there's some people that are going to pitch that because that's their pitch.
Yep. Yep, exactly. And perhaps the more, I think, realistic and honestly lower risk approach is to take like the micro deployment route, right? And then learn and iterate and get feedback and have everyone on board, right? So they're like they're bought in, right? And helps with that like people management piece. Um and I'd love to talk a little bit about to, one of the, a lot of people are not don't even have a WMS, right? And then many people are on legacy systems, right? So there's certain constraints or challenges there. And they might be on the path to upgrade said systems, right?
Mhm.
And then in the meantime, there's this pressure to automate, right? So it's like,
Right.
okay, if I wait till we, past peak, then upgrade the system and then we automate, right? And then it ends up delaying any sort of automation deployment out even further. And so, um, one of the things that I know SVT helps with a lot is kind of helping with that timing piece, right? So it
Yep.
doesn't, you can still accelerate that path to automation. And I'd love to talk a little bit about a customer that we share that where we deployed a leading AMR and connected it with the Tecsys instance, which
Yep.
was in this case a legacy system. Um, and we were able to sort of make that work, right, without delaying
Yeah.
the automation piece. Um, so in this case, I believe we used at in this scenario we used a flat file and we're able to adapt to that while the customers is planning that upgrade, right? So we're able to kind of meet them where they're at and keep sort of these paths of innovation moving forward on all fronts. Love to hear your perspective on that and you know the how critical what the benefits are, right, to um pursue that path to upgrade, right, regardless of where you're at.
Yeah, I know. And I think that's a great example, Chloe, of reality, right?
Right.
What is
Yeah.
the reality on the ground, as opposed to what is it that we, from a business perspective and a technology perspective, want. So to your example, and you're spot on, right? I think the first lesson is this is you know we at the end of the day as a WMS are we serve at the will of our customers, right? We are a tool our customers use and hopefully to use properly, and then they get the most benefit out of it. But we understand that our customers are also going to be looking at other tools like automation, like robots. And what we certainly do not want is for us, for our tool to be a hindrance or to slow down the adoption of other tools that they're looking for. And your example is a great one to demonstrate that even if one of our customers is not on the latest version of our warehouse management solution, and we'll get into why I think that's a good path to be on for automation. But in this particular case, what it demonstrates is there's an ability to bring on board a robotic solution to help address whatever issue that robotic solution is going to do, to have it integrate with our WMS, but then to work on that with regards to an upgrade to a later version of WMS and still retain a lot of the things that we need to do with that robotic system into the newer version. So part of the value prop, I think, of working, of course, with SVT is that ability to create that bridge and to create that linkage to whatever WMS system it is, but then to capture some of those learnings and apply it to a newer version of WMS, right? So none of that work is lost, so to speak, in the transition. I think that's the most important lesson with that is that, you know, we've worked obviously closely with you guys to ensure that there is, that constant evolution, that none of it works in a vacuum. But we want to build upon it to get to the next version of a WMS, because part of the value we see in being in the latest version of WMS is that it is more automation ready, right? So a lot of the things that you would need are already pre-baked. Because if you think about it, yes, conveyors, things of that nature have been around for much longer than AMRs or ASRS systems or goods to person. But if you think about what we consider air quotes here, modern automation, modern robotics, that's still probably just 15 years old at, 15, 16 years old. I mean, if we go back to when Kiva was created as sort of the launching
Mm.
point, that wasn't that long ago. So a lot of our WMSs, ours and everyone else's in the industry, back to my example of that factory using old logistics, a lot of warehouses out there are going to be using an older version of WMS. Why? Because it works. It's not a burning platform.
Yeah.
Having said that, what is interesting is that, you know, so much has changed with automation during that time frame that for companies out there, warehouses out there who are thinking about automation, that ability to also upgrade to a latest version of WMS, I would strongly encourage them to look at that. And I know this sounds like a shameless plug for us, and maybe it is, but for the industry as a whole, why? Because again, think about it from our perspective, meaning the WMS vendor perspective, right? We are now baking into our software some of the hooks and the actions that you would need to take full advantage of an automation or of modern automation that, again, 15, 10 years ago, we didn't even really think about as much as we do today.
Right, there's not the use case or the demand for that type of capability at the time, which is, par for course, right?
Yep. I'll give you sort of a funny side story to give people that perspective. When I was at Six River and I left Six River about 2.5 years ago, I remember we talked to some customers who said, well, what do we do with the truck's end of life? Right. Like, and we said, we don't know because we haven't had a truck get to its end of life. We haven't been in
Right,
business long enough, or the robots haven't been out in the market long enough for us to have any data as to, well, what happens at end of life? Do we replace the truck? Do we upgrade it? What does
right.
that look like? So that's just it's just an example of how young this industry really is, and therefore the WMS vendors, right, have also it's young for us too, right? We weren't developing WMS software in 1980 that was built for a locust robot. It wasn't around yet.
Yeah, no, it makes total sense. It is, and I think that's why, from a customer perspective, why I think it can just be, like, so intimidating. It's like, "Okay, we just finished implementing this, and it's already outdated." Whatever that tech might be, right?
Well, and that's the challenge with tech in general, right? Chloe, so you're absolutely right. And I think that's why it's daunting for a lot of businesses out there. And again, I'm going to date myself here, but I'm going to go back to, the early 2000s when I worked at a company called I2 Technologies, which is now part of Blue Yonder. And I remember going out there and one of our competitors, we would compete a lot with SAP and we'd go in and
Mhm.
try to sell. And people, sometimes it took them 2, 3 years to do an SAP ERP install. And then for us to come in there and say, oh yeah, that thing you started 3 years ago, it's kind of useless now. You got to buy our software for supply chain management.
Yeah.
It's a reality, right? It's the reality of software, the reality of technology. And I respect that from the perspective of customers, right? It's, hey, sometimes the sales cycles, by the time the sales cycle is done and it's installed, that technology has already changed 2 or 3 generations. I mean, it's crazy to think that way, but it's the reality. And we're only seeing that accelerate. And I think that's why, to some degree, what you said earlier, you're going to balance it. Sometimes customers, it's almost like you got to take a leap of faith. Start trying the technology because you know it's going to continuously evolve. Even as you are trying it or installing it, it's not going to stand still. And then iterate on it and
Yeah.
be ready again. Cliche alert, fail fast, right? Start
Yeah.
using it, understand where it works, where it doesn't. Understand it no matter what. And God bless them. I love all my salespeople and every salesperson out there. Whatever they sell you, how perfect it is probably not true, but it's going to solve specific problems you have. And it's still a tool.
Yep. Yep.
Robots, software, it's still a tool. And what do you make of that tool is up to you as well.
It's magic. It's not just a tool.
I know it's just this magic. It's just,
Solves everything.
yeah, just like, it's like all our apps, right? It just does everything we want it to do.
Exactly. Um, I think I think, what comes to mind when you say that too is, we haven't talked too much about the sort of integration piece of, like, connecting all of these disparate tech, like, OEM, pieces of technology, right, with host systems. Um, but I think, and we talk about that a lot, right? That's, like, why SVT exists, right?
Yep.
To handle that integration piece, but why it's so important to have flexibility in that integration so it can scale as, an AMR's API documentation changes, like, you're not going back and having to rewrite code, right?
Right.
Or as these sort of even minor updates are made, it's not disrupting warehouse operations, right? So that flexibility in integration or, being able to just scale and adapt from a code perspective is so critical because we're not, it's just, minimizing that risk at the end of the day.
Well, well, I love you guys. Would you say this, right? It's unrisking a lot of it where we're removing the risk. And
Yeah.
you're absolutely right. Cause we got to remember our customers have day jobs, and part of their day job should not be constantly updating APIs and rules and software code and all this. That's why we hire folks like you and us, right?
Yeah.
That's the service we provide. And I think that's the part that's going to continuously be a challenge. Back to what I said earlier about being on the road and talking about interoperability. Just think about the complexity that's going to add to a warehouse if all of a sudden what I'm asking for my automation is, all right, robot picking over here. I want you to integrate with robot picking arm over there, which then I want you to integrate with, robot pallet builder over there. By the way, I have a robot trucking robot that removes stuff out of the truck, and I want that to send signals to my storage robot. And oh, and oh, by the way, yeah, integrate all my labor management into that so that I have labor in the right place. And you just see the complaint, and that's in one warehouse. Now, if we're trying to run this across a network of warehouses, that complexity just goes up and up and up. So I do think it's one of those things, Chloe, that I think I don't want to say we ignore at times, but it's the devil's in the details, and a lot of times that detail is around that connectivity, that connective tissue that we have to put out there. And it's not not sexy. It's not a robot, but it incredibly important. And without that glue, a lot of what we try to do, is not going to work as well. And that's going to lead to people getting frustrated with the technology and not use the tool properly. And you see how that sort of snowballs and gives it, I don't want to say gives it a bad rap, but gets people, you know, their expectations have come in at this level. And then all of a sudden they get dropped to this level. Why? Because of a very simple but complicated thing, which is getting the systems to communicate properly. Um, and I do think in the industry and supply chain in general, that is something we've all been chasing forever, and I think we'll probably chase that I would think the rest of my lifetime at least, and if not beyond. So it's just to say that there's no easy solve, but there are, solutions out there that are trying to give you at least a good tool to be able to get to a better place with it.
Yeah.
but I certainly would not promote that we've solved it and we have sort of this, magic wand that we make everything play nice together and it's all kumbaya because that's not the case.
It's always a little bit more complicated, but hey, I would love to hear you talk a little bit about, the Texas Elite SoftBot connector that we partnered to release earlier this year, I believe. Yeah, it was around
Yes.
ProMax.
Yep.
I would love to hear a little bit about, like, why that was important for Texas and what that enables for your customers and prospects.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And we're, incredibly proud of the work we've done together, both organizations to get that up and running. And you mentioned, we unveiled it more or less, right? This past year in Chicago. So for us, what it really is A, reading the market, and B, listen to our customers. Back to what we talked about earlier, right? At the end of the day, we work at the behest of our customers. And what we've seen more and more, and certainly since I started here at Texas, more and more of our customers are coming to us asking about automation, asking about robots, asking about different types of robot. But then, of course, the next question becomes, oh, great. Well, how does a WMS, how does Elite talk to that robot? And that's where, working with you guys has certainly filled that gap and provided nothing's perfectly smooth, but a much more commercially ready solution for us to go together to market with to be able to say, okay, Mr. and Mrs. Client, you're looking at this type of robot. Well, with our partner SVT, we feel confident that we can integrate, to that robotic system so that from day one, messages are passed down properly from our system. We receive messages back properly. We basically are able to empower what that robotic vendor was supposed to do without having any issues with our system or with theirs. So to us, that's really exciting because again, the market is asking for it, but with that, the market still has a lot of education that it needs to be done. And back to our earlier discussion, right? Some of the connective tissue has to be put out there. Connective tissue has to be um, ready proofed, right? Commercially proofed, ready to go. And that's why working, of course, working with you guys has been a tremendous leap forward with that, right? Tapping into your expertise, tapping into all the robotic systems that you guys are comfortable with and know of has certainly opened up a lot for us and our customers to feel confident that they can go out and look at the market, understand, oh, we have options that we can go out and integrate with. And oh, by the way, we know that Texas and SVT will make sure that integration is as painless and seamless as possible. So that to me has really been really important for us. Part of it is just understand where the market was, but a lot of it is customers, right? Customers are looking for this. Customers will continue to, and we need to make sure that we are, ready to say we've got something that's, industrial strength for you when and where you're ready for robotics.
Absolutely. All about driving confidence and just, yeah, de-risking at the end of the day because change is hard. Um
Change is super hard and de-risking, and there's never going to be zero risk. We all know
Right,
that.
right, exactly.
But eliminating as much, or at least I think this is the part that's really, really been important to us, Chloe, is just being able to talk and understand what are the issues and being able to provide examples of where those issues have been solved. But then where those issues have not been solved, being able to admit to it, but also being able to demonstrate to the customer that, no, no, we're thinking about this. We're working on a solution.
Mhm.
It's not pre-baked. It's not ready. But when you ask us about question X, Y, or Z, we don't stand there like a deer in the headlights and we're like, we don't know what you're talking. No, no, it's a hard problem, but we've thought about it and we're working
Yeah.
on it. Because at the end of the day, I think that's the most important part, in my opinion, right? Especially going back to the discussion around like who do you pick for like a WMS vendor and all
Yeah.
this, is we don't have all the answers. And anybody who comes to you and tells you they do, or tells you that, they're a generative AI company and they're doing all this really
Yeah.
fantastic stuff, well, let's take a step back and look for someone that's a little bit more humble and understands that we don't all have all the answers.
Mhm.
Some of the questions we don't even know yet.
Yep.
Right? We don't even know what some of the questions will be, but that we are able to meet you and work with you to try to get to those answers. And I think that's the exciting part of working with you guys, right? Is that ability to have that forum by which we can explore, discuss, and solve for some of those issues. Because again, some issues that we haven't even thought of yet
Mhm.
that will crop up.
Absolutely. Makes a lot of sense. Um, All right. Well, this has been a pleasure. I would love to end by asking how can people find you, connect with you, and then learn more about Texas?
Absolutely. So, Texas is pretty simple. Just go to our website, and it's not the state of Texas. It's TECSYS. So, www.tecsys.com. We have an upcoming user conference as well coming up in Scottsdale, Arizona, in September, middle of September. So, by all means, if people are interested, look at that, and we'd love to have you there. As for myself, you can reach me, and I'm not going to call it the new name on Twitter. I will not call it X because I
Oh, yeah.
think it's a silly name, but, I'm on Twitter. It's just, at GCOURTIN. But then, of course, on LinkedIn or, through you guys, of course, my email's out there, my phone number. Please, by all means, reach out, LinkedIn or Twitter. Happy to connect with people, happy to chat more about what I'm seeing in the space, digitization, robots, WMS, all that fun stuff. Or, we can even talk a bigger topic of change management. I think it's always a fantastic topic.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Guy. It's been a pleasure.
Chloe, thank you so much and look forward to chatting again soon.
Likewise. Thank you.